Hey, hello, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Yes, I'm also very good. Yes, I joined because I wanted to tell you how we pronounce église in French. So it's église,
Église.
like you said,
Okay.
église.
Église.
Wait,
Sounds good.
église. So,
Église.
yes, my dear friend, so some weeks ago I joined your live and I asked you about multi-personality. You gave a good answer. Um, and I just have a question for you, because I am little mixed. My family is Muslim and all, and I have just a sincere question.
Okay.
Can and I know it sounds maybe rough, but can you convince me that Jesus have really resurrected? And can you not tell me, yes, this source claims this? Allez, can you really prove me this? I also
That's the way.
asked
That's the way to prove it,
my
bro.
Christian friends.
Yeah, yeah. That's the way. That's the way to. You're basically saying, hey. You're basically saying, prove to me that there's a resurrection, but don't use the evidence of the resurrection. That's what you're saying. Like you don't get to dictate what's
Okay,
evidence and what's not. Hold on, hold on. You yourself don't get to preference as to, or as to what is evidence and what's not. If you want to disprove the evidence, you disprove it by arguing against it. You can bring objections to it. You can say, well, this is not evidence because of ABC, or this is not evidence because of that. That is fair to do. You can do that, but you yourself don't dictate what is evidence for truth or not. Evidence for truth would be based on the laws of logic and the historical method in this case, which the historical method is based on the laws of logic. So you don't
and you
dictate
use
what's
also.
evidence and what's not, bro.
Okay, I maybe rephrased. I phrased maybe my question wrongly. Um, okay, so first of all, I
Why
don't
would you
want
why
to
would you
deny.
why would you get rid
I
of the
don't.
evidence of the resurrection? Like why would you, if I were to tell you, well, because of this source and that source we can conclude that there is a resurrection. Why would you deny that to begin with? What's
Okay,
your reason?
okay, my dear friend. First of all, I will never deny anything. There is one truth. It's very simple. I will never deny. Maybe it's true. Inshallah. And that's why I ask you. There is evidence Jesus existed. There are many sources. I read a book of Arul Velusamy, if you know him, from England. You know him?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I read a book where there are many sources Jesus really existed. I just wonder if it really happened. And you tell me that I cannot dictate evidence, but what is the evidence for the resurrection? Resurrection.
Yeah, so we know that he died on the cross historically. We know that he was put in a tomb and it was empty after 3 days. And we also know that the disciples did not make up a lie that they saw him resurrected. They believed it, even though we don't, even those historians won't admit that he resurrected because that's a supernatural claim. So we know they
Yes.
weren't lying about them seeing him resurrected, and we know the tomb was empty after 3 days. Now, the question for you would be, if the resurrection didn't happen, what other possibility can explain those two things, the empty tomb and them thinking they saw him resurrected? What can explain that?
Um, Someone opened. There are many reasons. Maybe someone opened it, removed
Hmm.
Jesus. Maybe
Yeah, so
you told
stealing the
that
body,
the apostle. Yes,
like
you said the apostles cannot lie. So
yeah, they more
maybe that is
they
also
did
an
not,
answer.
they genuinely believed it. Yeah, they genuinely believed it.
But I don't say that they lie. I know nothing. I am only a human who thinks. It's very simple. I will never say I know not what is the truth. But maybe they can lie. But it's not. But I don't say that they lie. So okay. So what is the next?
Okay, so if you're gonna go and say, well, it's possible that they stole the body. Okay, who would have stole the body?
Romans, maybe the Jewish leaders.
Why would the
I
Jewish
don't
say
know.
that wouldn't make sense? Because the Romans and the Jewish leaders, they by the tomb being empty gave them problems. The Jewish leaders gave them problems because it created Christianity, which then caused
Ah,
problems in
yeah.
Jerusalem. Hold on, it caused problems in Jerusalem, which then threatened their leadership, because if Rome gets upset about them having any civil unrest, they can come in and destroy the temple, which they ended up doing later on, by the way. Okay, so that wouldn't make sense. What would be the motivation for the Jewish or Roman leaders? And the Roman leaders didn't want problems either because they're making money off of the city, so or off of the whole territory. Why would they steal the body? What would be the motivation for that?
Okay, you're right. The Romans, they didn't want control. I understand. The Jewish, they just wanted him dead. So they are not, they don't gain something if they see him alive. Okay, you're right. I also understand this.
Okay, so who else could have
So-
stole the body then? What's another?
actually,
Who's another candidate?
So I think in nobody's advantage would it be that someone took his body,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, there's nobody that would have had, if the disciples weren't lying about it, they didn't steal the body, right? Lying about them seeing him resurrected, right?
Okay.
The other thing is it was guarded by 4 Roman soldiers, so it would have to be somebody that's willing to risk their life and defeat 4 Roman soldiers, right? Then they would have to
Yes.
roll over the rock and then take the body and make sure nobody sees them, and so like it's a big mission, okay? And
Yeah.
not saying that it's impossible for somebody to accomplish the mission. However, what is the like what would be the motivation for someone to do such a thing? They wouldn't gain any power. They were risking their life, and they don't gain any money or anything from doing it. So who would be a likely candidate to go steal that body? If we use that line of thinking, there is nobody that would have been capable, more than likely, to steal the body. Like it's just not plausible.
Okay, so can we exclude then this reason?
Yeah. So now the stealing the body is not an option, logically, because we don't have any good explanation. We don't have what the historians would call um, explanatory power. Okay. So when historians are doing the historical method to see what happened in history, they explore possibilities as to what could possibly happen. And if
Yeah.
you want to like pose a theory, like for example, someone stole the body, in order for that theory to stick, you would need to have explanatory power. You need to not only provide that it's possible, you need to be able to explain it coherently with all the other evidence that we have.
Right.
So, stealing the body does not have explanatory power. Therefore, we're eliminating it. Now, what's the next possibility of the tomb being empty and the disciples thinking they saw him resurrected? What's the next possibility?
I don't want to say it. Maybe they lied. Maybe they
Okay.
just wrote it down.
Good. Okay, they lied. All right, that's one possibility. All right, that the disciples didn't, in fact, see him bodily resurrected. They made up the story. Okay, cool. Now, remember, this has to have explanatory power. Okay, we do know that many of the disciples got tortured, persecuted, and died.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Some of the stories of the apostles are not backed up with a lot of evidence that historians would accept. However, we do have evidence for Peter and Paul, which were 2 heads of the church and wrote a good portions of the Bible. Okay. So between the 2 of them, and they both are two prominent figures that claim to have seen him bodily resurrected. Now, they also are, if it was a lie, them 2 would be the ones that would have made up the lie. Okay. It is not likely that multiple people would end up dying for something that they knew was a lie. Psychologically, that wouldn't follow. Eventually, one of them would have gave in and said it's a lie and not be willing to give up their life for it.
Yes.
So them lying about it, this is why the historians believe they weren't lying about it. It just doesn't follow that they would be lying and be willing to die and get tortured and persecuted for it. And they had nothing. And by the way, they also had nothing to gain for it. By holding on to this lie, they didn't gain any power, they didn't gain any money, and they didn't gain any sex. So those are the 3 prime motivations for people to lie about something like this. Yeah. So there was no sex, no power, no money for lying about this, and they were willing to go down to death for it. So therefore, it doesn't really hold that they would make this up.
Oh yes.
Okay. All right. So are you good with that, or do you have an objection to it that we can discuss further?
But I don't doubt the integrity of the apostles. Jesus.
Well, you said it. You said, what if they lied? You just said that.
It was I said it was a possibility. I
Okay.
never said it was a lie.
All right, cool. All right, no worries. So it was a possibility. Have I given you enough to at least pose that it's not probable that they lied?
You convinced me that it's logically it makes sense, and nobody would contribute with doing that. And the apostles, they truly believed, they were convinced, of course, if they
Yeah.
saw the miracles of Jesus, and they were as far to prepare to die even. And
Okay.
what happened then?
All right, cool. All right,
Okay,
so then no, they didn't steal the body then. They didn't lie. Okay, what's another possibility of the empty tomb and the apostles believing they saw him resurrected? What's another possibility other than a resurrection?
But he also came back in 3 days back, and then every apostle, he saw him, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what's another
And
possibility?
I never thought actually about this. And I don't know.
Here, I'll give you another possibility that people argue. Okay, so there's 3 possibilities. You covered 2 of them. Did they lie? They stole the body. The third possibility is hallucination theory. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So for the hallucination theory, psychologically, it is possible for a group of people to hallucinate the same hallucination. It's possible. All right.
Okay.
It's just not very likely. There's never been a recorded group hallucination ever in history, but psychologists will say that it is possible for it to happen. The only way that it can happen, hold on. The only way that it can happen is if there's a group of people that are grieving the death of somebody they love, right? The same person, which is the case for the apostles of Christ, right? However, one of the people that has strong evidence of his claim of seeing him bodily resurrected was St. Paul. And Paul was not grieving over his death. Why? Because he was a Pharisee that hated Christians. So therefore he wasn't grieving. Therefore he wouldn't fit as being a person that would have the possibility of hallucinating the same thing as the others. So the fact that he claimed he saw him bodily resurrected as well actually eliminates the entire possibility of it being a hallucination.
Because he wasn't part of the grief group.
Right. And in order for there to be a group hallucination, they all have to be grieving. Yeah. And he wasn't grieving.
And Saint Paul, excuse me, what was his name of the Pharisee?
St. Paul, what's his name?
Yes, I asked you, who was the one who didn't grieve?
St. Paul.
His name is Saint Paul.
Well, just Paul. I call him St. Paul out of respect.
Yes, but okay, of course. Okay. Thanks, my dear friend. It's also a good. But hallucination is.
So hallucination is not possible. The only other possibility, and Muslims would probably, some take this, some don't. A lot of them don't. But is the substitution theory that somebody else died in this place, or something like that. And that one is probably the weakest one of them all, because if somebody did in fact die in his place, it still doesn't explain the empty tomb. And if it was somebody else instead, if they were convinced that Jesus died on the cross and he didn't actually die on the cross, all the Romans and the Jewish leaders would have to do is present the body of the one who did die on the cross, and would have convinced everybody that he didn't resurrect, and that would have eliminated Christianity altogether. So that's not even possible either. So that leads to nothing. Like, there's no other possibilities unless you can think of one. And if there's no other possibilities, we know something happened. And if you believe that there's a God, then you believe that God has the ability to resurrect somebody. So out of all possibilities, if there's no other possibilities and all the other possibilities are eliminated using the historical method, then we can conclude that a resurrection, who we believe in God, is possible. That is the most logical and plausible explanation as to why the tomb was empty and why they believed that they saw him bodily resurrected, because it actually happened. And if Jesus Christ was resurrected from the dead and the apostles weren't lying about what they claimed, then that means their writings are reliable. And if they claim that Jesus resurrected from the dead and they wrote down his words, and Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, the Son of Man, and the Messiah, that means, and the Hebrew Bible, if we look at the prophecies of the Messiah, we see that the Messiah was supposed to be God incarnated all along, which means, and he's validated by the Creator, because only the Creator can resurrect a dead body. And if he's the Messiah, then he's God incarnated, which means that Christianity is true.
Yes, according to the Old Testament, yes. Okay, my dear friends, it all makes sense. What am I even speaking about, right? Huh? Okay, it all makes sense. It's a very consistent story, and I don't think that I'm a Muslim, and I'm not coming here for you to debate about this hallucination or substitute or lying or empty tomb. I'm still on my bed to search the truth, and my problem is, and my dilemma is this: I heard everything that we just spoke about, but does that include the does that mean that it's true?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's no other. The only other explanation would be that he resurrected. If he resurrected, then he's validated by the Creator, because only the Creator has the ability to do that. And if he validated by the Creator, that means his words are credible. And if the apostles weren't lying, they're credible. And if they claimed what his words were as far as the Messiah, and then on top of that, we can verify what they're claiming about Jesus with the prophecies of the Hebrew Bible, which existed way before the apostles. If it's coherent with the Hebrew Bible, which we still have today, and the prophecies of the Messiah, and we know the apostles weren't lying, they were willing to die for this. Then to top it off, they wrote down his words and what Jesus claimed, and then he in fact rose from the dead. Then we know he is the Messiah that was prophesied